From the KDLM studios in Detroit Lakes, it's Hodge Podge with Carol McCarthy, presented by Partnership for Health, and now airing on TV3.
And this morning on Hodge Podge, welcoming Detroit Lakes Mayor Matt Brenk into the studio. Good morning, Mayor Brenk.
Hey, good morning, Carol.
Well, July meeting of the council under the belt, and not that lengthy of an agenda, but kind of a longer meeting. Is kind of stuck on an issue regarding building of a deck on the lake shore. So that's kind of where we got hung up for 44 minutes.
Yeah, you're right. There wasn't a really huge amount of items on our agenda. A lot of things on the consent agenda, again, kind of a routine month. We did have an extended discussion about a deck in the Shoreland District on Detroit Lake, and that carried on for quite a while. And we had a good discussion. Ultimately, the council voted to deny the variance, and so that was really probably the biggest item on the agenda last night. All
right. Yeah, so that was something that the council passed 5-4 on a split vote, and I guess now the person needs to bring that back. But it had to do with the new shoreland ordinance and just some of the requirements that they have in that ordinance, and getting a variance lining up with the ordinance, and just a lot of discussion on that.
Yeah, the new ordinance, Carol, does not prohibit people from applying for a variance. It's really no different than the old shoreland ordinance in that respect. So what these folks were asking for was a variance to have the deck in the shoreland, encroach into the shoreland district, so to speak, and so ultimately the decision by the council was to not go along with it.
Okay. All right. So moving along here with our discussion, another presentation last night, I guess at the beginning, we can kind of go back to the beginning of the meeting, was Elizabeth Weffel from the League of Minnesota Cities. And she gave a presentation, kind of a wrap-up of the legislative session and how Detroit Lakes fared on some of the issues.
Actually, Elizabeth is with the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, and she was at the council meeting last night and did address the council. The Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, we're a member of that organization, have been for many, many years, and they do a lot of the lobbying down at the legislature for its member cities. And she talked about things last night like local government aid, childcare, public facilities funding, transportation issues, and different things that they lobby the legislature for throughout the year. And so it was a good report to get, and we always appreciate when Elizabeth comes. She's one of the attorneys for the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities.
All right. It sounds like we made out pretty well with the local government aid, bringing us back up to levels since 2002. Is that correct?
We've been constantly losing local government aid over the past 15 to 20 years. And at one time, I think we were receiving $1.6 million per year in local government aid. Now it's down to maybe below $500,000. So it's diminished each year for a number of years. And this year we were scheduled, I believe, to lose an additional $90,000 to $100,000 more in local government aid. And through the efforts of our local legislatures, Representative Mark Wart and Senator Eakin, we were able to keep our LGA allotment for this year the same as last year. So we didn't lose that $90,000 to $100,000. And losing that amount of money represents almost 2% in our levy. So it's important.
All right. And she kind of gave a layout of the situation down there with the House being more oriented towards the metro area, although we did have our key player down there, Paul Marquardt, who happened to be the tax chair, who was a big proponent of getting this LGA back to the cities.
Yeah, Paul's the tax chair, and he's been a tremendous supporter of Detroit Lakes throughout the years, and we're fortunate to have great representation down at the legislature. And you're right, Elizabeth did allude to the fact that the House is much more dominated now by the metro cities, and so it's always good to have that strong voice in our area, like Representative Marquardt.
All right. In the studio this morning with Detroit Lakes Mayor Matt Brenk, talking about things going on in the city. Detroit Lakes City Council held their July meeting last night, and some of the other things on the agenda. Of course, we've got lots of projects going on around the city, and our city engineer, John Pratt, gave an update on those. Of course, the weather the last few days have put the kibosh on some of those projects, but it sounds like the Willow Street project is moving right along kind of on schedule. And
yeah, John indicated that in spite of the weather, the Willow and West Avenue projects are pretty much on schedule. Actually, driving out to the station this morning, I crossed Willow Street, and it's kind of a muddy mess in there. So we do need some nice weather to make sure we stay on schedule with those projects. They're very big projects, by the way, for the city, and so they're going to be nice, but we're going to have to suffer through some construction here for a bit more.
All right. It sounds like the utilities are all buried now, the pipes and such, and it sounds like the overlay will begin pretty soon.
Yeah, the segment from Roosevelt to Washington Avenue, I think you're correct that the underground infrastructure is in place. And I see now that the other day they started working on the segment from Roosevelt to Jackson Avenue. So the first part of that will be to get that underground infrastructure. But John did indicate that some of the curb and gutter and final grading and different things will start to occur on the main part.
All right. And then in a couple of weeks, it sounds like the construction party will move to West Avenue, which is another part of that project.
Yeah, the digging and all the excavating and things like that will start over on West Avenue in a couple weeks, and so we'll have another big segment in Detroit Lakes under construction, and hopefully by this fall they'll be done and looking good.
Yes, I took the opportunity the other day on one of our nice days to walk around that area down West Avenue, and boy, that is in need of repairs.
It really is. It's a street that's deteriorated beyond where we really want things to go, but it's always been a real expensive project and a tough project, and by the way, Carol, we did get some good news on both Willow and West Avenue in the fact that we received some low-interest funding for the water and wastewater parts of those projects. And as a matter of fact, the two low-interest loans are going to save us almost $250,000 in interest, and so that can go back against the project. And in addition to that, we received a grant for these projects in the amount of $2.2 million. And so that can be used to buy down this project as well. So that's going to help out the cause immensely, because this is a big, expensive project, the combination of Willow and West Avenue.
So is that going to help with the assessments on residents? Or
I think the council will have to analyze how this is all going to shake out because this has just happened the other day. And so we'll have to see how this shakes out with the savings and the interest and the grant.
All right, so some good news there, and some other good news. The city will be moving toward, we should keep turkeys in suspense, maybe, so to speak. But there's some good news about electric charging stations that was divulged last night, too. And we're going to hold off right there and take a quick break, and we'll be back with more from Detroit Lakes Mayor Matt Brenk next on Hodge Podge. Welcome back to Hodge Podge this Wednesday morning. Back in the studio with Mayor Matt Brenk, talking about things going on in the city. And Mayor Brenk, one thing that was brought up yesterday was also the city is looking at installing some charging stations, electric charging stations, with the movement of electric cars more and more on the roads, and this being a tourist area. It's about time Detroit Lakes got on the e-car movement.
Yeah, there are a number of corridors in Minnesota that are designated to receive grants to have charging stations, and we happen to be in a corridor kind of at the northwest end of that corridor. And actually a private firm is going to be receiving the grant money and putting in the station or stations, and we were asked to provide some space for the charging stations, and there were certain criteria. It's got to be close to a trunk highway and accessible to this and that. So I don't have all the criteria in the top of my head, but the site, one of the sites we sort of identified as a space that's not really utilized for anything between the municipal liquor store and the downtown crossing, the Jimmy John's, that end of the downtown crossing. So it would be there with probably 2 charging stations, and then we're identifying whether we can go up to, I think, in the future, up to 6 charging stations in that location. If not, we would seek another location that met the criteria. So
okay,
sounds like that'll be coming.
Yeah, so that's great. And it takes about an hour to charge up a car. And in the meantime, people can charge her up and go charge themselves up at shopping or eating or something downtown.
Yeah, I know a guy his son has one of these electric cars, and I asked how they if they've got a little get up and go like a regular car, and he said it's unbelievable how well they work. So that's the wave of the future, I guess.
Right, and we had a meeting here later in the spring, and they had some vehicles out in the Washington Square Mall parking lot, and one of the guys that drove down from northern Minnesota. He said, was it a 300-mile round trip? And he said it cost him, it was free. He didn't have to pay for anything as far as fuel.
I actually don't know how this all shakes out with the money, because obviously, the electricity costs somebody's money somewhere to generate, and so not sure how this works, if you pay a rate to charge your car or if it's subsidized. I'm not sure.
Well, this guy had wind energy, so wind energy powered the solar
so
that was in his car.
So
he was totally
it
was totally free. So there we go. So things moving ahead with that in Detroit Lakes. And so when would we see these charging stations go in? Before the end of the year, or would it be something for next year? Or I guess that wasn't.
Now you stumped me. You're not supposed to stump me. But let me just look here. I'm not.
Well, it sounded like the 2 charging stations would come pretty quickly, and they're not real huge things to install. So,
you know what? I'll find out, and you can ask me next month.
Okay, right. Detroit Lakes Mayor Brenk in the studio with me this morning, talking about things going on in the city. Also, there is a discussion about Green Step City becoming a Green Step City, or designated as a Green Step City. I know we've had people from Partnership for Health in, and there's a Green Corps representative working with them, and he works with Green Step, the Green Step program. And I know that was part of discussion for Detroit Lakes, and you'll bring it back in August, I guess.
Right. This is really an initiative from the League of Minnesota Cities, and it's something we've started to discuss. It's a program to, increase efficiency in our buildings, save energy, be more green, et cetera. So it covers just a wide variety of things, including sustainable purchasing and conservation issues, et cetera, et cetera. And so we already have a number of these initiatives in place. So we're going to continue to discuss and make a list of the things that we already do and the things that we need to do, and then it'll come back to the council at a future city council meeting.
All right. And more discussion next month as well on that. And also, we had an update yesterday among all the projects being discussed around town. Of course, the building of a trail, the extending of the trail, the Heartland Trail, I guess, through the Lincoln Avenue area.
Right. We did approve the plans and specifications, and we are going to go out for bids to do 3 different things. One being the trail you're referring to, which would go from right now that the trail in the city ends at the edge of the Sanford property down on is it Lyndale Avenue?
Yes, kind
And
of
then-
across from the ball field.
Right. We would carry that from that point along the outfield of the Washington Park ball field over by the rec center and continue through the park over to the pavilion. So that would be one of the items that would be on this project. We are also going to go out for bids for the South Shore Park parking lot, and also there's some ADA improvements that we'll be doing to the Veterans Memorial Parkway. So
Okay.
those three things were included in that resolution last evening.
All right. So things are moving ahead with a couple more projects, and I think those are slated to start later this summer.
Those will start and be completed this summer, correct?
Okay. All right. Detroit Lakes Mayor Matt Brenk in the studio with me this morning. And Mayor Brenk, also each meeting, it seems like last meeting in June, we had the approval of a short-term rental, like a VRBO rental passed. And now there seems to be more of those short-term rentals popping up with the new ordinance designation that people have to have a conditional use permit to operate one of those.
We do require a conditional use permit, and therefore it becomes a public type situation if someone intends to establish and get a license for a for rent by owner type situation. And so one good point that Alderman Wenner made last evening was that if there are problems, because some of the neighbors have attended some of the hearings when we've looked at approving these conditional use permits, and we've had some neighbors come in. But one of the points that Alderman Wenner made was that if there are problems and issues, the city council does have the authority and the ability to revoke that conditional use permit at any time if there are problems. So we think we have a good ordinance in place that we think the requirements that we have placed on these types of rentals are appropriate, and so I guess time will tell. It's a kind of a relatively new thing here in Detroit Lakes, so we'll see how it goes.
All right. And we've got a few more minutes left, Mayor Brenk. And yesterday I attended, you weren't at this meeting, but a number of city folks were. It was a housing listening session for housing, the housing situation in the area. And I think we had Kurt Keena, who's the head of the HRA housing in Detroit Lakes. Ron Zeman, the vice mayor, Kelsey Clem was on hand. And other people from the area talking about housing issues in the city of Detroit Lakes. I know we've had discussions about this. The city council has a lot of discussions about this, about affordable housing, kind of the lack of, and rental properties and increasing prices just on properties all over the place.
Yeah, and this whole housing issue is not unique to Detroit Lakes. There are a number of cities in Minnesota that are facing the same types of problems or issues that we are, but we need more housing. We need more affordable housing, and it's all tied together. The housing and the workforce thing and the child care thing, and they're all sort of meshed together. And a key piece, of course, is the housing and finding solutions to have affordable housing for folks. And so it's good to have these meetings. It's good to share ideas and try to find solutions. And I think over time, we will be able to find some ways to make improvements. And in the meantime, we've got a tremendous amount of building going on in Detroit Lakes. I think last year, in 2018, I think there was over 50 new single-family homes built in Detroit Lakes. And it looks to me, I haven't looked at the building permits lately, but just driving around, it looks to me like there's still a tremendous amount of new homes going up in the community. So that's good to see.
All right. In the studio with Detroit Lakes Mayor Matt Brenk. And Mayor Brenk, I just wanted to mention, too, there is a meeting tonight on another project that is going to start, I guess, next week. It's on the Randolph Road project and County Highway 54 projects.
Yes, we're reconstructing Randolph Road from Chris Street all the way out to County Highway 54. Part of the impetus for doing this project is the fact that the Chris Street signal lights are going to be changed, which I think will be good news to a lot of folks. And we're also going to be having signal lights at the intersection of County 54, right? Mm-hmm. County 54, East Shore Drive, and Highway 10. And a lot of the industrial park truck traffic will likely route out to that stoplight to access egress and ingress on Highway 10 and in and out of the industrial park. And so we're reconstructing Randolph Road to a 10-ton commercial type roadway. And tonight from 5 to 7, there's an open house at City Hall. There'll be a presentation at 5:15 if anyone's interested in more details on the scope of the project and the timeline and that type of thing.
All right. So there you go. Lots going on in the city of Detroit Lakes. Lots of bustle around town and the area.
And we have the Water Carnival starting this weekend. It's probably one of the best events in our city, I think. It's just a lot of fun, a lot of family fun, a lot of great events. And I always look forward to riding in the parade.
All right. So, you get your
hopefully the sun will be out and it'll be a nice day.
All right. Well, summer definitely has arrived in the Lakes area. Mayor Brenk, thank you so much for coming in today, and we'll see you around at some of those events.
Sounds good, Carol. Thanks.
And that's going to wrap up Hodge Podge for this Wednesday. I'm Carol McCarthy, KDLM.